Thanks, Senator Smith. My understanding is Senator Sinema is joining us remotely. Senator Sinema from
Yes.
Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. Arizonans are always interested in investment opportunities that allow them to build better lives for themselves and their families, especially in the last few years in conversations at the grocery store, the gym, the coffee shop, or the kitchen table. Arizonans have been talking about cryptocurrency, the hype, the skepticism, the questions of how it works and how it will work going forward. Like most Arizonans, I'm a skeptical optimist. I believe in the future and the potential of this technology, that it can be a force for good, and that it can ultimately make people's lives better. But also clear-eyed about what's happening right now, how technology and anonymity can be misused and abused, and how people are being deceived and defrauded. The collapse of FTX is just one of many recent market events that have shaken investors' faith in the ecosystem. Some will say that this is about the ecosystem as a whole. Others will say this merely applies to centralized entities and that this criticism should not apply to more decentralized projects. But even in the context of decentralized projects, we need to understand how dispersed ownership truly is. So this is a complex issue, but I want to put the focus where it should be, on everyday Arizonans, many of whom put their faith in a technology that appeals to our independent leanings and our natural skepticism of government and centralized control. So I believe we have some obligations to everyday Arizonans. First, to make sure they have the information they need to understand risks and opportunities, and ultimately to make investment decisions that work for themselves and for their families. Second, to grow the U.S. economy and protect the integrity of our capital markets. Third, to provide a regulatory framework that responsibly promotes innovation here in the U.S. while increasing funding for enforcement to ensure that any bad actor is pursued quickly and harshly. So protect investors, protect the economy, promote innovation, go after the bad guys. It's pretty fundamental. So I'd like to turn to Professor Allen and thank him for being here. Your testimony cites a Financial Times article entitled "Let It Burn" that calls for crypto to do just that, to burn down as a fully unregulated business. So let's be specific. In the cases of FTX, Terra, Luna, Celsius, and others, who exactly got burned?
It was the investors.
That's right. I also want to apologize, Professor Allen. I misnamed you there for a moment. I apologize. In other words, it was investors, right? Everyday Arizonans, people who work hard for the money they make and are just trying to provide for their families, save for their kids' college, or take that vacation they've always dreamed of. The founders didn't get burned, even if ultimately they got arrested. It's regular people who got burned. And that's why it frustrates me when people say flippantly, "let it burn," because that's the hard-earned savings that everyday people invested in good faith with promises of big returns. And for FTX customers, all of that is now gone. Now, most people had no idea they'd find themselves as unsecured creditors, unlikely to get back the investments they'd entrusted to Mr. Bankman-Fried and others. And they're last in line behind banks, lawyers, other lenders, and venture funds. For months, I've had people in Washington tell me and my staff that new legislation isn't necessary here. They say that there's sufficient regulatory authority and that the regulators should just handle it unimpeded. But my question is, where were the regulators? I was encouraged to see fraud charges pressed against Mr. Bankman-Fried and his subsequent extradition and arrest. But let's be serious. That was reactive, not proactive. And frankly, it's the least that government could do. And perhaps most importantly for all those regular Americans, it's not going to get them their money back. And others will say that this is a classic case of buyer beware. It's clear that due to murky jurisdictional issues, unanswered legal questions, and a lack of regulatory clarity, investors are having a difficult time accurately pricing risk. In finance, we learn that the return on your investment should be related to the risk that you bear. But if you can't price the risk, it's hard to understand what return you should expect. And that cuts at the core of how a healthy market should function. Professor Allen, your testimony highlights a number of ways that greater regulation enforcement can be valuable for investors. And I'm interested in identifying specific ways that we can assist investors in quantifying the risk they may be taking on. Are there specific disclosure or registration requirements that you believe may assist investors in more accurate price discovery?
Thank you, Senator. So first of all, I want to point out that the let it burn argument may seem harsh, and it's not one that I advocate for this reason, but it may seem harsh to the individual investors, but it's advocated in the a sense of trying to protect people who haven't invested in crypto from broader financial failure. So it's not as harsh as it might seem. We're trying to find a regulatory regime that can protect non-investors as well as investors. And that's what I've tried to advocate for in my testimony. In terms of protecting investors, as I've said, I don't know how you can really protect them from crypto assets with more disclosures, because what are you actually disclosing about an asset that has nothing behind it? I think that the securities laws are effective in requiring registration, which means people who have assets with nothing behind them won't be able to offer them in the first place. And that, I think, is the value, the ex ante value, as you said, instead of an ex post enforcement action. I think that is the value of applying the securities laws here. And yes, I wish they had been enforced more aggressively in the lead up to this. I think the SEC has not had enough resources. I also think that the SEC has faced a lot of significant political pressure to back off from the crypto industry. It received letters from Congresspeople last year saying, don't look at FTX. So I think that full-throated support from Congress for the SEC's investor protection mission could be very effective in increasing enforcement in this space.
Thank you, Professor Allen. Thank you, Senator Sinema. Senator Toomey has one last question, as I do, and then we'll wrap. Thank you.